Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. We're very excited to be back in the seat and we've got another fantastic guest lined up for you guys. So we're really looking forward to this show. There's going to be a lot to talk about. And thank you for those tuning in live and for those listening back and watching back on YouTube and the podcast. Hello, Chris Hooley. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, Aggett. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. It's been one of those weeks in work where you just kind of feel like we could do this full time, but it happens. And the fact is, it's Friday. We get to do this show and unwind in the best kind of way. So, and the sun's been out in Wales, which is a rare sight. But it's true. It is true. The sun does appear in Wales now and then.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to tonight's show. Obviously, we've talked a lot on this show about mental health and depression, and obviously being a veteran and all that type of stuff. So it's nice that we're moving into this space where we can chat to people who are experts in the field and hopefully give listeners a lot of tips in and around wrestling with mental health and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's chat and getting involved.
I like what you did there, Chris. Wrestling with mental health, because tonight's guest is a wrestler. Oh, was a professional wrestler, as an ex-professional wrestler. But yes, wrestling with depression and mental health. Yeah, great comment, and very much looking forward to it. And I think the reason we do that is a lot of creative people kind of have that natural connection with their deep self, and that resonates a lot with deep thoughts and feelings that often do kind of push creatives down that route of being very aware of their feelings and their mental health. And often that does, unfortunately, push us down a little depressive route as well. And in this day and age where social media is so prevalent, so prevalent, I think it's forcing people to look at other people's lives with such kind of higher expectancy and compare that to their own lives when that's not really the case. And depression is something that it really does affect our youth a lot more than it should. So, apart from trying to tackle that through speaking, which we do quite often, I think having a guest on like tonight is going to be a lot of fun in terms of experience and story and advice for us. But also the fact that we get to talk about it again, I think is only going to help us push that message out even more, so that it's okay to feel like the way you do, and for men especially to voice that, because we know from experience that so many people don't. And it's one of those things that when you're in that kind of zone, it's shutting off and isolating is kind of the thing you want to do. But in reality, we know those times will pass, and we just hope people do understand that before it's past that point,
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, obviously I was going to make a joke about it then and say get some tissues ready, but
it's not that kind of show, Chris.
Yeah, you went different there, but obviously we have talked on this show a lot about mental health, and I think it is important to have these conversations. And obviously I've worked a lot on mental health this year. I've tried to take my experience and pass it on to anyone who can use it as well. That's why you've been getting in cold plunges and things like that. So it's great to share the advice, and when you have an experience yourself, if you can pass it on to another, even if just one person listens to this show and gets something from it tonight, or whenever you're listening back, it's great. And that's what we're doing it for. That's why we're going to have these difficult conversations, as society likes to label them.
Yeah, and you're quite right. The cold plunges, and for anyone who is going down this journey, I highly recommend that you go and follow Chris Hooley's Substack. He's written quite a lot of messages about this and articles, and thanks to Chris Hooley, for myself, who was going through a patch as well, I'm in a very much more positive position, and that is also down to the fact that Chris suggested I get for my birthday an ice bath. I hate the cold. It's done wonders for me. So I've got a lot to thank him for. So go and follow that at Substack. I'm sure you'll enjoy it and the articles he's written. I'm going to get tonight's guest on because we've got a lot to talk about. And although me and Chris could probably talk for a whole hour ourselves, we do have a guest to chat to. So tonight's guest is someone whose story is as powerful as his mission. Dr. Skip Mondragon is a man who's worn many uniforms, a U.S. colonel, Army colonel, an internal medicine doctor, a national wrestling champion, and now a passionate advocate for men's mental health. From being a bullied bookish school kid with a speech impediment, to rising through the ranks of the military, Skip has faced and overcome countless challenges, and now he's using his voice to speak for those who feel like they've lost theirs. His message? That the tough guy's persona is costing lives, and it's time that we talk about it. So please help me in giving a nice warm welcome to the amazing Dr. Skip Mondragon. Hello.
Wow. Howdy, men. It's great to be on with you. I'm listening to your intro and seeing your intro. You're raising a glass. It looked like it was beer. I'm thinking, man, I'm jealous. I've got some mixture here with some creatine and some electrolytes. I'm thinking, oh man, they're drinking beer. What's up with that?
Yeah, well, it's a little later in the UK for us, and
Yeah, that's
amazingly,
true. That's true. You guys are several hours ahead, but I think at least 6 hours ahead. Then I'm thinking, oh, ice plunges. Oh man, I'm jealous there too. It's like, oh dang it, I don't have access to an ice plunge.
well,
I'd have to go fill up my bath with ice with ice and something. The best I can do is a cold shower, and at this time of year, it's not so cold anymore.
I hate the cold showers. Not at all for me, but the plunges work.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazingly, I'm on this bit of a health kick at the moment, and electrolytes and creatine is my new morning kind of ritual. So,
Hey,
yeah, I'm
here's
on that
to
one.
you, buddy.
Yeah. Well, here's to you. I've got a rum in there, so apologies.
No
So,
apologies needed.
yes, Skip, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Honestly, I've been so much looking forward to this. We connected on LinkedIn, right?
I believe so, and I think yes, that's right. You had reached out and said, I've seen your profile there. I'd like to bring you on." And I thought, I'd love to come on and talk. Anytime I get to talk regarding men's mental health, I'm down for it. Absolutely.
Yes, amazing. So, first of all, where in the world are you coming from?
I'm in the Dallas Fort Worth area here in the great Republic of Texas.
Amazing. And how is it there in Texas at the moment? What's the weather like?
It's very pleasant right now. So we've had some crazy weather where it's gotten a lot hotter, gotten up pushing 90 degrees here this late winter, early spring, and down where it's been rather chilly. So
Yeah,
it's been wacky weather. But
I can
it's very
imagine.
pleasant today.
Yeah. You know, we're going to get into the rounds soon. So we play a little video for each segment, and then we talk about kind of your road to writing and your book and all those good things. But I love to find out. This is a question I've been asking everybody, and I can't help myself. But do you find as a writer, if there's much of a connection for you in kind of your local area, or is it kind of mainly online where you make kind of connections like we have?
I'm not sure I understand the question in terms of the connections related to the writing. Is that what you're saying with other
Yeah,
writers or with other individuals?
with writers, but also individuals. So, for example, with what you do, kind of in terms of your mental health service or your writing, do you meet
Mhm.
many people in real life in your areas, or is it mostly kind of an online thing?
It's primarily online, but I always carry a copy of my book wherever I go. I have a copy in hand, and so I have met people when I'm traveling in airports or in hotels. Uh, when I've been on various trips, when I've been at wrestling meets, I might run
Mm.
into somebody. Ran into an old coach that we actually knew. My brother and I knew from back when we were junior high and high school. Chris actually knew him. He's my youngest brother, who's 7 years my junior. And Chris knew him from the time he was 12. And so I've known him uh, from the time I'm a little bit older, but Charlie White was his name. Wonderful man, had been coach at a very prominent wrestling school in South southwest Colorado. I grew up in the state of Colorado, called Rocky Ford, and they were he had some very dominant teams over the years. But this man was invested in the community over the years, and that was really Charlie's legacy. He had great wrestling teams, but more than that, he loved his wrestlers. He loved his community, and they loved him. But he was also a very prominent wrestling official. So he officiated at some very prominent wrestling competitions, including world championships, etc., national championships, and so forth. So he talks about some of these matches that he is officiated. It's incredible to talk to Charlie. It was a lot of fun. So I had a book. Last time we were at the Olympic wrestling trials, ran into Charlie. We had a great time connecting, and I said, "Oh, Charlie, I'd like to." We were talking. Somehow it came up about the book and depression and so forth in men. Because I think his son, Danny, who happens to be an orthopedic surgeon, very prominent orthopedic surgeon in Wyoming, as I believe a veteran, had struggled with some depression. And he said, but he's doing better now. And we got to talking. And I said, well, I wrote a book about this, Charlie. And I happen to have a copy and so forth. And so I signed it specifically to Charlie and so forth and presented to him. And he was just overjoyed. But I carry copies for that type of thing. I've run into veterans from time to time. Let me talk to you about this, and have given them copies and this. Or speaking engagements that I've been at, I'll keep some copies when I go and talk. And sometimes individuals will ask, gee, do you have a book? Well, yeah, I do happen to have a book, and if you're interested. So this type of thing. And when I was at a speaking engagement last summer, the guy that runs the engagement, for instance, that ran the conference, he basically sold the books for me. Well, I want you to know that Colonel Mondragon has this book, and he doesn't want to go home with any of these books, so you can see him in the back, and I'm sure he'll be happy to sell you copies. Basically, he sold my books for me.
Incredible.
I just stood at the back and sold books and signed books for people. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So it happens both ways in terms of.
I think it's a great writing tip. So many people struggle to get their books out there. And the fact that you might have a couple in your bag. I know we've been to the Aggett Crime Writers Festival a couple of times, and a lot of people come up and give us their books, and it does work, because that gets your book in someone's hands that might not normally get that book. So it's a good little marketing tip, I think.
Yes, sir. I think it's the best marketing tip, especially when they've met you personally.
Yeah.
When they've looked you in the eye, you've shared some stories, and there you personalize that book to them. That means so much to that individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on something else, obviously, that's personal. If we talk about depression, why depression? Like, obviously, some people would think, well, it's a topic that I might tackle to help other people, or it's something I've been through myself. But what was your journey to it?
What was my journey? Well, in brief, my last 18 months on active duty, we served 26 years on active duty. In my last 18 months, I struggled with major depression. And as I was beginning to recover, which was a long, painful process, it was 2 steps forward and 1 back. There were nights I sat on the edge of the bed next to my sweetheart, Sherry. This year we'll celebrate 44 years of marriage, actually next month.
Amazing.
Tears streaming down my face, telling her, honey, it's not going to always be like this. Honey, I am going to get better. But as I'm crawling and digging and clawing my way out of this deep, dark pit, and as I get to that point of recovery, and there's a couple of pivotal points that I'd like to point out. One was my brother Chris called me. And my brother Chris, he's my youngest brother, as I mentioned, and I call him my alter ego. I have 7 siblings. 4 younger brothers, 2 older sisters, and a younger sister. And Chris called me. He was very excited. So I was about 6, 7 weeks into my recovery. And so I was starting to get better, but still struggling. And he was so excited. Skip, I've been to this Bible study with Franklin Graham. This was the son of Billy Graham. And he was talking about suffering. You would think at this point, because of the suffering I'd been into, I thought, oh my gosh, you want to talk to me about suffering? But actually, I was excited to hear what he had to say. And Franklin was talking to us, why as Christians, especially Western Christians, do we think we should be exempt from suffering? If Christ suffered so brutally upon that cross for us, why do we think we should be exempt from suffering? And when he said that, it was like, bam, hit me right between the eyes. And it brought to mind a verse that the Apostle Paul wrote in the book of Philippians, I believe it's Philippians 3:10, that I might know him, referring to Christ, and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, being made conformable to his image. And so when Chris said that, I began to think about that. And up to that point, now for well over a year and a half, my prayers had been, Lord, please, please deliver me from this darkness. I had screamed those prayers. I had cried those prayers. I had uttered those prayers. I had silently begged those prayers. And it felt like those prayers just went to the ceiling and bounced off, that to no avail. That had been my prayers.
Yeah.
And over a course of 2 days, my prayers shifted from that, Lord, please, please deliver me from this darkness, to Lord, what would you have me learn? And how can I use it to help others?
How do you navigate then, obviously, in the field that you're in terms of mental health? How do you navigate the people who haven't found a faith, are still struggling with mental health?
Yeah.
How do you sort of navigate the two without sort of, because obviously I can see the massive benefit of combining the two, and that's
sure. And
great.
And it's not hard that in terms of that, because what that shift did for me, it changed my perspective. It changed my course of recovery, and it changed really the course of my life, because I knew at that moment in time then, after that, that I was going to have to share my story. So Chris, at that point, I knew I was going to have to share my story. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I knew I was going to have to share my story. So I began to jot down lessons learned, what I had learned and what I was learning, with the intent I was going to share it. And later that year, I got to do some public service announcements for the Department of the Army on mental health, on suicide prevention. I got to speak in front of the entire medical staff morning in a morning session and an afternoon session to talk about this very thing, to share my story. And I was a prominent colonel in the hospital. Here I am, a decorated war veteran. Here I am, a national veterans wrestling champion, well known, sit on some of the highest committees in the hospital. I'm a tough guy. And I'm up there sharing my story with the intent that, okay, I want people to understand that tough guys can struggle too. And asking for help is not a sign of weakness. That's just part of life. That we all will struggle at some point in our life and need help. And it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. And so that was the entree and the first time, if you will, that I shared my story publicly. And the comments that I got, oh, that was so courageous of you. Oh, that was my story. That was my brother's story. That was my father's story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing story. Halo in the comments said that's so powerful, and I agree. I'd like to know, like, because there'll be people in that situation who have not quite got the courage to do what you've done. Maybe not to the scale of what you've done, but to then voice their story. So looking back to before you kind of managed to get the courage and the guidance to voice your story, what advice have you got for that person who might be sitting at that point where they're feeling like their prayers, their thoughts, their kind of outward projection is not getting heard, and they're stuck at that point?
You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family. You owe it to your friends to go get help. Don't struggle in silence one more day. And men, especially, we don't want to admit we are struggling. And I think there's this idea that I must be weak. There must be something wrong with me inherently. I must be less than a man if I'm struggling. If I admit I am having this problem. But again, that's not a weakness there. You're not less than a man. You are simply human.
Yeah.
And don't struggle one more day in silence. Go get help. Open up. Go get help. You'll be glad you did, because that will be the door that you open that can now allow you to begin to get better.
Yeah. And this might sound like a not maybe a simple question, but someone might be watching or listening to this and think, okay, I'm in that position. I don't know how to get help. Have you got maybe a tip of how or where they can go to get that sort of help?
Absolutely. Here in the US, you can dial 988. And if you're a veteran, 988-1, extension 1. Bam, they'll put you in touch with somebody.
Yeah.
That's simple. And so there are ways to do that. You can reach out to a trusted advisor, a pastor, a rabbi, a mullah. You can reach out to somebody there. You can call your doctor and say, I'm struggling. I need some help. So there's various venues. There is NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. You could Google their number and contact them and say, where's somebody locally that I can contact?
Mm-hmm.
So there are a variety of ways that you can, today, you could get help.
Amazing.
You don't have to sit there and struggle on your own one more day.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I was going to say then is like knowing the distinction between both depression and suicidal intent, because I've experienced both. And I feel from my own experience, they feel very different, because one is like, for example, when I was on the cusp of suicide, I was like, I don't feel weak. I don't feel like I need to talk to somebody. I just don't want to be here anymore. Whereas depression, I may have had some of those things where, oh yeah, I just need to talk to someone. I just need to clear my head. But the suicide element was, I just don't want to carry on. So what would your advice be there in terms of like for people in both categories, what they can do in those moments?
In both cases, you need somebody to help you walk along that journey. And of course, we always talk about that in terms of in the military, you need a battle buddy. And this is where you need a battle buddy in life. You need somebody that you latch onto and say, I need you, or buddies, I need you in this journey, because we can't go it alone. Case in point, I tell people, thank goodness I had those individuals who helped me. I had the A team taking care of me. I had such great help. I had a clinical psychologist, Mike Perry, whom I'll be forever grateful to, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Perry. I had a great primary care physician, a psychiatrist. I had massage therapists and others at some point who were helping with chronic pain issues that I developed. But that aside, I also had the support of my sweetheart and others. So I had all that helping me. Family, the professionals, my family, my friends, and I knew God was also there helping me. So I had that support, but we can't do it alone. We need somebody, flesh and blood, walking alongside us, helping us that we can lean on. So we talk about that battle buddy, that individual when we're in war zones, that's with us, that checking on us, making sure we're all right, making sure where we're at here. We go to meals together, we kibitz together, we talk together, we debrief together, we do these things together, we hang out together. We're making sure the other is okay. And of course, those who are combat fighters, I'm a combat fighter, they're literally, making sure their battle buddy is safe in the battle. But this is a battle for life. And so they've got to make sure their buddy is okay. They're calling them up. They're saying, hey, I'm coming by to have coffee with you. Hey, I'm coming by and we're going to go for a walk. Hey, I'm coming by and we're going to go to breakfast. And it's not like, oh, I want to invite you. When you're depressed, you don't have the energy, as you well know. You don't have the energy to plan those kind of things. And if somebody would invite you, well, you want to come with us and do this? Yeah, the energy to say, well, yeah, okay, yeah. Where are we going to meet? No. But if somebody drops by your house and say, Chris, get your butt ready. We're going. Well, guess what? Come on. Or I'm coming by. We're going to have coffee together. That type of thing. That's what we need at that point. We need that person to come alongside us. And when you are having that suicidal intent, that's what you need. And you need professional help at that point too. It's not just you need that, but you need professional help. Because now you need somebody that's skilled and trained to help now reorient that brain, because our thinking is all out of whack.
So with like suicide rates and stuff like that all going up, like with as a trend with men over the past like 10 years, let's say, suicide rates are going higher and higher. People are obviously not seeking out that support. In your professional opinion, what do you think is going wrong there?
We live in the most interconnected world, Chris, but the most disconnected world. And I saw this very poignantly the last time I was in Iraq. This was 2010 to 2011. And I would get, on 2 occasions during the year I was there, I was able to go do some R&R in Qatar, or Qatar, as they might say in that part of the world, but we would call it Qatar. There, and I was on an Air Force base there. And I saw this phenomena that alarmed me at that time. And it's the harbinger of what we see now. And on that base, they have a couple of clubs, and you are allowed to go there. Sometimes they'll have a live show and different things there, but you could have up to 2 beers a night. Back where we were, there were no beer served, but you're on R&R. You can have a couple beers at night. That was pretty cool. So you go to the club, you can hang out, you can be with people, you could watch a show if there was a live show, you could have a couple beers. So it's like, hey, this is pretty cool. But I saw this phenomenon. I saw these airmen come in here, these service members, and they would bring their computers in, and they might be doing at that time, I don't remember what it was. It was before you had Zoom, I think. but they would be interacting with whomever via camera. There would be somebody sitting next to them, and they would not be talking.
Mm.
And I thought, there could be somebody who's struggling, who goes to their job and works all day, never really interacts really in a true interpersonal way, goes to supper, and I'll tell you about that in a minute here, and never really interacts in a real interpersonal way at the chow hall, comes here in the midst of all these people and never really interacts, goes back to their quarters, and nobody knows they're struggling. They're lonely. They're isolated. But they never have any real, true heart-to-heart connection with anybody. They don't have a battle buddy. They don't have anybody that they're truly interacting with. So I saw this back 2010 to 2011, and I thought, oh my word. This is a disaster waiting to happen. And so this is one of the phenomena that's going on. That, and you mentioned young people and the rates in young people mental illness. You had mentioned that in your intro, and this idea that kids are lonely. Kids don't know how to interact face to face. Watch how many of these young people will sit next to each other and they're texting each other. They're not talking to one another. There are young adults that they're having to send to etiquette classes. They're having to teach them how to talk on the phone to people, how to interact, because they are so awkward in doing this face-to-face type of thing. Oh, I don't call. I've heard somebody say, tell me at their work, the person they suggest, well, why don't you give that person a call regarding a follow-up to this? Oh, no, I don't call. I send emails.
Yeah.
Can you believe that? So
I
this
actually
is what I'm talking about.
I really think that
loneliness, this disconnection.
Yeah, in the modern world, I really think that we're going to have a big problem with young people when it comes to simple jobs that they might go into where they have to use the phone, because no one is growing up using a phone anymore. You know, it's kind of mind blowing that might be a thing, but I think it's going that way. Anya says people are not alone, but they're lonely. She said, I see this in some of my students. They sit together and they're on their phones. And that's exactly what you were saying. And I just think you're nailing it on the head in terms of more connected in the world, but more apart in any other way that we've seen in the past. And I think we're trying to discover how that affects people and learn how to adapt to that as we go along now.
In fact, our Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, he wrote a book about this when he was Surgeon General, and it was about loneliness. Yeah. He thought when he became Surgeon General, there would be other problems as he visited various parts of the U.S. People would be talking about the addiction problems and the overdose deaths and poverty and other things there, mental health issues. But, you know, the thing they talked about more than anything else was loneliness. And so he wrote a whole book about this epidemic of loneliness and all the social implications related to loneliness.
I read a really interesting quote, and I can't remember who said it, but they said that men follow a path. They either give themselves over to addiction and become an addict of some type. They either give themselves over to faith and let their life be controlled by faith, or they quit and they commit, and they basically commit.
Wow.
And I just wanted to unpick that with you, because obviously you've got experience in different elements, and you obviously talked about the significance of God in your life as well. And obviously, if those are the three options for men, how do you even begin to navigate that? Because you either become an addict some sort. And I'm not necessarily saying that it could be a destructive habit. It could be you could be addicted to sports or something like that. But you have to give yourself over to something bigger than yourself, or you could do it with faith and you give yourself over to something bigger than yourself, or you quit and you obviously.
See, we're all created for something beyond ourselves. And I think we innately understand that, and we're searching for that. And so we're looking for that. What is that? Something bigger than ourselves. And so those of us who joined the military, we wanted to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Those of us who are in the medical field, we want to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves. And so many of us in life, we're looking, what's that something bigger than ourselves, something that is beyond me? And so you're right, I think, Chris, is that idea that we're going to invest in something bigger than ourselves. But what is it going to be?
It's really interesting that you mentioned that. And it's kind of hitting home in a sense, because when I left the military, the biggest thing for me was finding a purpose. And I've always put it down to finding a purpose kind of gets me out of my depressive moods when it happens. Yep. Having a purpose. So since I've left, I've had a conversation recently where I talked about I've filled my time since I've left with wherever I can, whether that's down to the writing or the show and all those things. I'm just constantly trying to be busy and have a purpose. And I think what you're latching onto there is having an addiction is almost having a purpose where you're working towards something, whether it's good or bad. Mm-hmm. Your faith is you're working towards something, whether that's self-improvement and belief and all of those things. And I think for me, that resonates kind of really well and kind of makes me understand a bit more of my sort of journey in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Because we're so invested in the military when we're in the military. That's such a big, our identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And when we step out of that uniform, man, it's like culture shock. I know it was for me, and I had been preparing for it for a few years.
Yeah, of course. Well, I only served 6.5 years, and you had an amazing career. So even in that short time, I really felt, especially going in as a young person, that was my formative years, and to then leave into a world of civilian life where, as you mentioned, your battle buddies are not really there, and you kind of all work and no play. Is in the military, you get work and play. You kind of feel like you're isolated at that stage, mm-hmm. and you've lost that bigger than yourself kind of purpose. So I'm sure there are so many veterans that feel that when they leave, that they've got to regather that purpose. And it's interesting, like what Chris said, where you either have to find an obsession or an addiction, and that could be in many forms. For many, probably is gym. For a lot of people, they would have gone down the mental health route, like yourself, with supporting other veterans and things like that. So I think that's a very interesting comment, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's so insightful, and especially men who are struggling because they'll self-medicate.
Yeah.
And in so many ways. And of course, it could be what we think about in terms of addictions, drugs, alcohol, gambling, illicit sex, risky sex. It could be driving like a maniac. It could be taking, being this adrenaline junkie. I got to do, this kind of stuff here. I got to do all this crazy stuff to do this. They may be addicted to that, but it can be so many different things, and that may be self-destructive, or you might be addicted to, like you say, working out. Might be to your sports and your sports team. You can see that I'm a big Broncos fan. I love my Broncos, but at the end of the day, I realized, it's a lot more fun to win than to lose. But it's a game. Okay, it's a game. But I sure do like it when we win.
Okay, what we're going to have to do is, because I know this conversation, we could go hours with this, and we obviously got a time limit on the show. So we need to talk about your book. And we've done this kind of out of order because the way that, the conversation's going and you've got so much knowledge, it's great to talk about it in the kind of natural sense, which is great. So, could you let everybody know what Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps is all about?
Oh, Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps is a book written for men, especially for tough guys. And it's written as a practical guide that you can put into practice today. Short, simple to read chapters that you don't have to read necessarily in order, but it gives you tips, techniques, tactics to help you if you're struggling with depression, or to help you maintain health and wellness. That's the basis of Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps. Now, the title is born out of my own struggle with wrestling. I take wrestling anecdotes, so real live wrestling anecdotes from my life. I've been involved with the sport of wrestling since I was 13 years old. I'll be 70 years old this year. So I take anecdotes from my own life and I apply those to wrestling with depression and how that helped me with recovery and helped others with recovery. And so that is those lessons applied, how they apply to recovery, how they apply to life, how they apply to maintaining health and wellness. So how you can take those and use those, if you will, in a prophylactic sense, if you are well, to maintain your wellness, or once you've recovered, to maintain your wellness. And that's the intent of Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps.
It's going to sound like a really daft question, I think. But does depression change from when you are a child to later on in life? And do the tactics used to deal with it change as well as a result? Because I'm just trying to cover all bases here in terms of, like, I think about my own children and what their depression or struggle could look like. Not necessarily depression, because obviously that's more clinical, but in terms of downtime. And then obviously when you go later in life, like I was thinking about my own experience. My granddad passed away a couple of years ago, and my nana, her experience, she's got a lot of people that are getting ill in and around her life, and she's got a lot of grief. And obviously that grief could be a gateway to depression, I think.
Oh, yes.
So I'm just wondering if it does look different, what the tools look like for combating it at different stages.
Yeah, and kids may manifest a little bit differently in that they may isolate, or they may simply, their behavior may become more erratic when children are depressed. Anger may manifest itself both in children and especially in men. And irritability in men is another aspect. Isolation, men tend to isolate. Oftentimes is one of the earmarks. Oftentimes for men, may lose interest. Both may lose interest in their normal activities. The technical term for this is anhedonia. We think of the hedonist and anhedonia. They just lose pleasure in things. So the things that normally give them pleasure don't have any interest. And man, that was the case for me. Even my sex drive was like,
been there on all those counts.
That type of thing. I wasn't even interested in my wrestling. I just took too much. Everything just took too much energy. It was just too hard to do it. So those are some of the things there. So lifestyle works for everybody. And what does that look like? Trying to regulate your sleep. And my psychiatrist once said, as your sleep goes, Skip, so will your depression. Because my sleep was so messed up. There were nights that I just longed for 2 hours of uninterrupted sleep, many a night. That's if I could have gotten 2 hours of uninterrupted sleep, I would have been delighted, because the insomnia was so horrendous. So sleep is important, and getting kids, not letting kids take this into their rooms, not letting kids have access to this, because the dings, the pings, and the rings there. I've seen mine as they got to be older. They have that, and they're taking a nap or sleeping on the couch or something, and every little ding, ping, ring, they're like, what are you doing? Put that in the other room. Get that away from you. The other is getting moving, just that movement, getting your body moving is so important. So some kind of regular daily movement, and a daily walk is outstanding. If you can do some other exercise, great, but just outside, especially outside. You're in a climate where sunshine is not very prevalent. I'm in a climate where it is prevalent. Thank you, Lord, because I also suffer from what's called SAD, seasonal affective disorder. You put me in a climate where you live, CJ, I would be like, ooh,
Yeah, I get that.
I need sunshine. I do not do well.
And a tip on that, if you're
When I
wearing that
don't see
situation,
the sun, man, I don't do well.
I've got a wake up alarm clock that rises like the sunshine. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
do have that, it
So I
helps.
need that. So getting out. And if you combine some of this, let's say you have somebody that says, let's go out for a walk with the friend outside in the sun. Now you get all those benefits together. So you're trying to combine some things, and then again, not trying to eat a good natural diet. In other words, if it looks like real food, if it is real food, then it's good. What's good for the body is good for the brain. That's basically what I tell people.
Well, I'll tell you one thing
Those
right
are
now.
3 simple things there. So good community, hanging out with people with healthy relationships, and you got the bases covered. All
Yeah.
those lifestyle things make a difference in anybody's recovery, no matter what their age, no matter what.
I'll tell you one thing now. Off the back of that is what Chris spoke about earlier. Getting me into the ice bathing has really helped me.
Oh,
It's given
wow.
me a ton of energy, which I never expected.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping better because of that. But I've also taken a real approach to cutting out the rubbish that I'm eating and eating more healthily. And all of that combined has changed how I feel day to day. Just the energy I have. I don't have the crashes from eating the rubbish anymore. And there's so many things that has contributed to making me feel like a better person as a whole. So anyone who is in a bit of a rut, who goes to eating binge food and feeling that rush of sugar, then the crash, I know it's a bit of a hard step, but if you can manage to eat a healthy diet, and it just sounds boring, but it's not. You can eat a healthy diet and hit the ice baths or go for walks and runs. All of that contributes to a body that feels much more active and much more healthy, and that follows with the mind.
Absolutely.
So get those fundamental basics right, and you can notice a big change in yourself.
Yeah. And let me add 2 others, if I may, in terms of the lifestyle that I strongly advocate. And one of those is gratitude. And I challenge people. I say, write down 3 things you're grateful for each and every day, and why you're grateful for them. And better yet, share them with somebody. And you do that for 30 days, it will change the outlook of your life, because what you appreciate appreciates. And the more grateful you are, the more things you will find to be grateful for. And the other is laughter. Laughter has so many important qualities. Try not to laugh when somebody else is laughing. When somebody is heartily laughing and they're trying not to laugh. Have you been watching a movie and the person next to you starts cracking up? Try not to laugh. Or you've been in a movie theater where people start to laugh, and try to stifle that laugh.
Yeah.
Laughter is infectious, but laughter relieves stress. Laughter builds up our immune system. Laughter accelerates healing. Laughter releases these wonderful endorphins in our body that make us feel better, and these other hormones. Laughter increases our strength and our stamina. Laughter has wonderful healing qualities that it does for us. Plus, it binds us together. So laughter is this great medicine. In fact, one of my favorite verses is Proverbs 17:22 that says, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth up the bones." So laughter. In fact, I wrote that prescription probably for thousands of patients over the years. I'd say, you need to go home and you need to liberally take this each and every day. Liberal doses of this medicine.
I'm glad you mentioned the Bible then, because I do want to touch on it a little bit, because I've had my own sort of, I don't know how to word it in the right way. Not sort of challenges and questions of faith, I suppose, because are you familiar with the work of Neville Goddard?
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with the work. No, sir.
Well, Neville Goddard takes the Bible more metaphorically and suggests
Okay.
that God is internal. Whereas obviously the literal Bible talks obviously about the messages that Jesus Christ gives and delivers. And both are really interesting because obviously the messages are very same, but it's how you should interpret it that's a bit different. And obviously I've read both because I like I said, I have my own sort of crisis of like, well, if I'm not going to be addicted to something, then I'll give faith a go. I'll try that because I know the other option is to end it. So I'll have a little look over there and see what that's saying. And yeah, I mean, I suppose I struggle with it because I remember I was on my knees. I was literally I was just bawling my eyes out. I was like, just please, just give me something that's going to help me get through this. And nothing came. So I was like, well, if you can't come to me when I'm asking and I'm on my knees and I'm at the lowest point, you're not coming to help me. You know what I mean? There's nothing. I didn't feel any sort. There was not like a magical movie moment where a ray of sunshine just came through the window and landed on my face. There was no message from somebody that was, just checking in on you, or no email or something like that. That was just like, are you okay? Or what I would think of it as a sort of divine intervention. There was sort of no message there. And I thought, you know what? I'm on my own. And then that led me to Neville Goddard. And then I was learning about the messages in the Bible, because obviously you've mentioned a few of them tonight. They are really good messages. They're great if you take them on board. They will improve your life. They will help you. But then I suppose I struggle with that aspect of, is it me on my own? Or do I put my faith in a higher power? Or is that higher power my own strength?
Well, I can only speak from my own personal experience and in terms of what I know and what I understand from Scripture. And what I understand is God will always, if you continue with an open, searching heart, that's all I can say to you. That continue with that open heart. Don't lose heart, I guess is what I'm saying, and don't give up on seeking, because you're obviously wanting to know, is there something there? Is there someone there? And with that in mind, not to lose heart, not to say, oh, that didn't happen then when I was at that deep, dark place, because for 18 months I cried out, oh, please, please, please. And I felt like my prayers went to the ceiling and bounced back. I didn't sense God. I didn't sense him. Where is he? Where is he? I was having trouble remembering what I read in Scripture, what I read 5 minutes before. My mind was so there. I was just struggling such, and my heart feeling like this. My hand is doing this. My voice quivering. All of these things. And yet, I knew in my heart of hearts, Chris, that God had not abandoned me. I had no sense of it at that point, in that deep darkness. And yet, in my heart of hearts, I knew I'm not alone. And yet, there was no sense. It felt like I was in that deep, dark pit all alone. That I couldn't hear God. I couldn't sense God. But I knew I'm not alone. So I would not, I would say, don't despair. Don't lose heart. Keep your heart open and continue to search. Continue to search.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it does always get profound when you go to religion.
Yes, sir, it does. It does. It touches us at our deepest core. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Because of the deepest longings of our heart, the deepest aspects of our lives. And you are a very intent man. And so don't despair.
And what I will say off the back of that is, obviously, I did read the Bible. I did read Neville Goddard stuff, but I also got into science in a big way. And the odds of you being alive in this moment, whether it's divine or just statistically, are rare, like beyond rare. Like you could win the lottery like 1,000 times over. You could win the lottery multiple times compared to the chances of you actually being alive in this moment. So that was one of the things that I did take from it. You know, whether it's divine intervention that you're here, or whether it's just fate, or because of some weird cosmic stuff that's happened. The thing is, you're here, you've got this shot, you might as well make the most of it while you're here, and, you know, find out as much as you can along the way. If something helps you, you know, there's been bits in the Bible that have helped me that I still stick to. There's been bits that, you know, finding things out about from other areas that have always stuck with me, and I've gone, oh, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll use that. That's going to work. So again, I would say, like you said, stay open to all possibilities, and finding your purpose in that respect, in terms of, like, the odds of you being even existing were slim to none anyway, and you're here. So make the most of it.
Absolutely. And, you know, the wonder, just take your thumbprint. You think about it. There is nobody else who ever has been, whoever will be, that has the same thumbprint. Think about it.
Yep. You've got me
That's
thinking
how unique you are.
Yeah. that is yeah, amazing. What a thing to think about that is. We're nearly out of time, and we've hardly. What I'm going to say is, there was so much I wanted to know about you and your journey, and we talked about one of the most important things there is. So there's nothing to say that this show hasn't been of absolute value. But I'd love to get you back on to chat about your wrestling, about your career.
Man, yeah.
All those things.
You can't connect to the Wi-Fi. You might want to check the connection settings.
I don't know what that person's my thing's talking about. Yeah, I'd love to get you back on to talk about all that stuff.
Absolutely, that would be delightful. It would be my pleasure.
Yeah, there's so much. But before we have to wrap up, we're nearly out of time. Where can people buy your book? Where can they find out more information?
They could find that on Amazon. They could find that would be the easiest place, would be to find it on Amazon. And they could reach out to me on LinkedIn, Dr. Skip Mondragon. That would be perhaps the easiest way to connect with me. Or they could look at my website at transformtoughguys.com.
Yeah. And I want to get a question about wrestling. When did you start wrestling? I've got to ask.
At 13, because I had failed miserably at any sport. Didn't know how to kick, didn't know how to catch, didn't know how to throw, didn't know how to run, didn't know how to jump. Man, I failed at tetherball.
But you knew it through people.
But when I got into that wrestling room, after a few practices, I thought, I think I could be pretty good at this. And then after a few more practices, I think I could be really good at this. And part of it was there was finally an even playing field because I typically was the smallest kid in my class until 8th grade when I was 13. Now there are some kids about my same size. Now I was competing against boys my same size. I wasn't having to compete against these boys that were typically a lot bigger, faster, stronger, and so forth. Now I'm going against boys my same size. And one of the things I realized is one of my superpowers is I can outwork people.
Yeah.
And I realized I'm not as fast. I'm not as coordinated. I don't have these natural gifts, athletic gifts. I'm not as strong naturally. I will work hard, and I outworked people. And that's what that's what I learned to do was to work hard. And made the varsity team as an 8th grader. Didn't win a match. Now I want to understand. I was one of the best guys, certainly as a 9th grader in the wrestling room, and still didn't win a match that next year either. It took me 2 years to win a match, and that was the summer after 9th grade before I went to high school. But then once I won a tournament, and then once I started winning, I had a lot of success. 2-time district champion, state runner-up, multiple state freestyle championships, placed in 2 national tournaments, honorable mention All-American as a high schooler, mediocre at best college career, which cut short after 2 years. But then went on afterwards and wrestled. And then, of course, at the age of 56, brought home this national championship and then national runner-up the year after that. So I have been invested in wrestling many years and love the sport because of the life lessons it's taught me.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to have to say is, because the time now is, we've had an amazing lesson from you, or an amazing discussion about men's mental health and mental health in general. And we can't thank you enough for that. But I'm going to contact you again, and hopefully we can get you back on for part 2 when we talk about your career and your story as well. So for me, I want to say that's been absolutely a refreshing conversation that has touched the realities of what we've all been through, seemingly, which is the case in itself to say that that's 100% on this screen that have been through those similar kind of issues, all seemingly independently and in that own little
Yes.
in reality, not independently. So there's a message to talk, and I want to say thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure for me to chat to you.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, and I'll just say, go and buy the Good Doctor's book, because any advice on battling depression and wrestling depression is good advice. So go and get it.
Thank you, Chris.
Amazing. So from us, everybody, by the way, if you need to talk, obviously Skip talked about where you can contact people in the US. In the UK, we'll leave links in this. We'll try and find some and put them on there for you. But like the big message was, make sure you've got that battle buddy. Get out, enjoy the outside environment, and look for those sort of outcomes and sources of relief in that sense. So if you do need a chat,
close, but scan narrator window heading exiting narrator.
If you do need a chat, get in touch, and we'll certainly help you out as well if we can. So from us, it's goodbye. Have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you all very, very soon. Thank you, everybody.